I've sung the praises of Made In Cookware for a while now. I own many pieces myself. Now Made In has changed nonstick cookware for good with their ceramic-clad pans. They're premium stainless pans with next-gen ceramic coating free of harmful materials. Beautiful, even cooking, and easy to clean. It's even oven safe up to 550 degrees. How do I know how great they are? I added one to my kitchen. Don't need a nonstick pan? Made In has pots, cutlery, bakeware, glassware, and everything you need. Take your home cooking to the next level by upgrading your cookware by going to unitedwedrink.com/madein, MADEIN. Find out why pros trust Made In. Go to unitedwedrink.com/madein and upgrade your kitchen and cooking today. The opinions and statements in this podcast do not represent those of the host's employers, co-workers, family, or imaginary friends. Now enjoy the show.
Happy hour? More like amateur hour. Welcome to United We Drink.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another new episode of the United We Drink podcast right here on unitedwedrink.com, as well as Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever fine podcasts are found. My name is Mike Urevich, and I just nailed this for the first take. Trust me, I did it. With me, as always, is my friends and industry cohorts, I guess you could say, Kevin Abbott, Tim Johnson. How are you gentlemen doing tonight?
Just lovely, Mike. Just getting through another wonderful week.
I feel like all three of us are very tired and very battered for very different reasons. None of which I think anyone really knows why, but we all can say yeah, we get you. We sympathize with each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's just get into the scene. What are we drinking? Because here's an interesting thing, because we are recording on a Thursday, not a Wednesday that we normally do. This is normally not a drinking day for me, but I decided, sure, I'll do it. I up until I grabbed my stuff to start, to open up my computer, I was going to just do NA beer, and then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna have a fest beer. So I'm having our fest beer from Copper Point in our special mug that we're doing for our Oktoberfest that is this weekend, which when you listen to this, it already happened. So, timing.
So go back in time and come on down.
So you're going to be plugging DeLoreans at the end of the show.
And if you have one of those, you know what you need to do. You know what you need to go back in time, and you know what you need to do. That's all I'm saying.
Not get that haircut I did in 1997. Yeah. I'm pretty sure that's what you're referring to.
Yep.
Okay.
I have to go down and pick that beer up. Did you do distribution with that beer this year, or is that taproom?
Just all in taproom?
I have to try to make my way down and pick some of that up. Because I'm already talking, I guess I will tell you what I'm drinking. So I am drinking the Kentucky Pumpkin Barrel Ale, which I'm familiar with this brand. I think the Kentucky Bourbon Barrel Ale is pretty good. But I don't have a lot of experience with this beer. It was mentioned to me recently, and I was like, I love pumpkin beer. And I went and picked it up. It's really freaking good. I did not have high expectations. It's a 10% bourbon barrel pumpkin beer. It is beautiful to look at. It is just golden in color, clear, not boozy. It's not overly pumpkin. It's not overly bourbon. It's not overly sweet. It is just right hitting all the aspects of a pumpkin beer. And the bourbon the oak is really nice to round out those spice flavors. And it's just, I'm really impressed. I picked it up going, oh, we'll see how this thing is. And it's like, this is going to become part of my regular rotation for pumpkin beers going forward.
I saw that on tap at Dixie Bar and Grill, and like it's not my thing, so I was just like, I'm not gonna get one of those. But I was like, oh, they did a pumpkin beer. I'm like, of course they did. Like they do everything as a bourbon barrel aged beer
But
there, so it
the
makes
thing
total
is,
sense.
the thing
And
is,
high octane too.
I'm sorry, I'm stepping all over your words, Mike. I apologize. I just wanted to point out, you said like, of course they do it. This beer's been in production for 12 years. It's been around. In fact, when you go on like Beer Advocate, I remember the old label. I had the beer years ago. It didn't resonate with me at that time. And the new label is really good looking. I really like what they've done. And the last thing I'll say before I let Tim actually talk is they have like embossed glass, like
Mhm.
Dogfish had. I don't know if they still do, if they even do bottles anymore. But I remember when I got into beer, I was like, this is like the pinnacle. When you get your own glass and you get the raised seal, or you get your name embossed across the glass or whatever. And it's called embossing. I don't know. Molded into the glass. And we never did it at Barrel of Monks. It was too expensive. We weren't buying that much glass, but it's really cool. It's a great bottle. It's great imaging. It's nice. Tip.
I am drinking a Crispin hard cider, the original recipe apparently, or just a Crispin original is what it is. I'm sure it's not the original recipe because this does say premium cider made with fresh pressed apples, and if I recall, the original Crispin was just made from concentrate. But we talked about Crispin, not on the pod, but via text, and so I thought, well, I'll go ahead and stop off at Minneapolis Cider Company that now owns the right to the Crispin name and pick some up. While I was there, I also had a Nelson Citra dry hopped cider that was really quite lovely. So that was nice. And so now I am pairing my Minneapolis original Crispin hard cider with my Minneapolis original Totino's party pizza. So I'm going all in on brands you didn't realize were Minnesotan.
And also brands that go so well together. I mean, why am I not eating and drinking that right now?
Yeah, exactly.
I love Crispin. It was so good. Crispin was a standout for me, and Florida Beer Company made a raspberry cider. And I forget the name it was under because it
Kelly's.
was Kelly's. There you go. I love that thing. I just, that was like one of those ones where it's like, I had 2 or 3 beers tonight. I want one more drink, but I'm kind of beered out. Oh my God, I'll have a, raspberry cider, because that and Crispin were my go-tos forever. And of course, neither one of them exists down here anymore. So
yeah,
Crispin was the first industry job I interviewed for.
I remember that.
For a sales rep position for them in South Florida. They were relatively new to the area. They had not been bought by Miller yet. And I interviewed for that. I did not get the job. They told me that they the guy who was like the state sales manager told me they use fresh juice, not concentrate, for their cider. So I may.
They might have. I remember at the time of the sale.
Maybe when they went to Miller, they switched to that. But.
Well, no, that's when they really started getting stuff interesting. So, little brief history about Crispin.
Here we go. Get your popcorn.
So Crispin was started by
now it's Minnesota history with Tim.
Crispin was started by this guy, Joe Heron. So Joe had started. He creates these beverage companies and then sells them off, right? So he created some soda company that he sold to Pepsi. He created Crispin with the sole intent of selling this thing off, and he sold it off to Miller Coors. He created this whiskey that he sold off to Constellation Brands. He's currently doing this RTD brand called Bar Diver. I don't know where they're produced now, but we were producing them when I was at Denver. Joe isn't making anything. He's creating brands and then using third party to create them, and then using that to create a brand that he can sell off to a large company. He's done it for years, for decades. That's what he does. And so, like, they didn't have a Crispin facility here. They had an address in Northeast Minneapolis, but there was no production that was going on there. And because I remember the time when they sold, and we were like, "Oh, isn't it sad that a big guy got it?" I'm like, "No, this is more of a, local boy does good, right?" Like the whole joke in Garden State about creating Silent Velcro and selling it to like 3M or whatever. Like, you wouldn't call that guy a sellout. You would be like, "Hey, that guy created something to sell, and he did, and that's what Joe did." Crispin came after him selling off his soda to Pepsi, so this was already in his repertoire. But I'm quite certain at the time they had even said something about things being made from concentrate. Now, I don't a lot of that other stuff, those RTD cocktails were all made with neutral grain spirit. So they might say things like old fashioned, but it's all neutral grain spirit. So I don't know what was told to you. I know what was the understanding of everyone here in the Twin Cities. Now there might have been some production at some facilities where they were doing more creative things or whatever. But I think a lot of the stuff that was getting mass produced was not artisanal or handcrafted by any means, especially for national production.
Okay.
I know that we have a topic that we're going to talk about, and maybe this loosely ties into it, or maybe not. It's just in my brain. But one of the things you said there, Tim, that's really interesting was that this person created this brand with the purpose of getting it to sell to a big guy, right?
Yeah.
And I think that the only difference between that person and the vast majority of every craft brewer who's got into this industry in the last 15 years is that this person was purely contracting their stuff and didn't have a on-site location. I had a conversation with somebody about maybe doing some, when we had the whole thing with Oddbreed, where we purchased a share of Wild Ales, we had a lot of people from South Florida go, "Oh, do you want another brewery? Because I'm interested in selling my brewery, or bringing on more partners." Like, as if like Barrel of Monks was gonna like we're like some big guy that can collect, like we're like a mini Canarchy or something. Like, we're gonna collect local Florida brands. But I mean, I respect it, by the way, and I completely understand somebody who is like looking at this and going, we're gonna get out, or we're looking to sell, and are you guys interested? It makes sense. But we had like 5 different people contact us, and one of the people sat down and said, and literally said, when I created this brand, the entire idea was one day we're going to be able to sell it to Budweiser. And it's funny because it was honest, right? And I think that so many people, maybe I'm, talking about 5 years ago, not right now, but so many people 5 years ago, if you told them that their favorite local craft brewery was created just to sell out, they would have not believed you, right? It was all about the craft and the local and all this stuff. I think if you put all the craft breweries in Florida and maybe even on the map in the US and threw a dart and you hit one, they were created to sell to Budweiser or Constellation, because that's what the whole point was. It was to get rich. And I'm not saying there aren't breweries that wasn't the purpose. There's tons of breweries that wanted to do their own thing and maybe had opportunities to sell out and didn't. But I think that's the majority of people and not the minority. And I like the idea that, like, okay, good for you. You created a brand, you sold it out, and now you get to live on a beach somewhere for your hard work and effort.
Well, that's the thing is like I've met Joe because, like I said, we made his product at Dashfire. Nice guy, but that's like he's more serial entrepreneur than anything else. And I think where I would maybe disagree with you is, I think, yeah, maybe there were people who wanted to do it, but they still had a love and appreciation for it. Like, it wasn't just solely like I make beverage widgets, right? And I feel like and I'm sure Joe would say otherwise, but having made plenty of bar diver, this was production of beverage widgets more than anything. Now, now it's one thing to, I want to create a good, respected brewery that attracts the attention of Budweiser. Sure, it's a whole other thing. Just be like, I'm just here to create a brand that the product is sort of actually second or third. Again, I'm sure Joe would dispute that, but at the same time, in the short period of time from going to selling something to Pepsi and then going to Crispin and selling that off in a very short period of time, and again, no, there was no Crispin tap room or anything like that. Like it's funny, and so when Miller Coors finally killed the brand, then Minneapolis Cider Company, who also makes Trail Magic, which we've talked about on the show, they were able to acquire the rights, and it's pretty awesome to have that. So they still have their own kind of brand, and they have the Crispin brand, and you can go into the tap room and you can grab some of that as well. They also have a really neat space because they have pickleball courts, like a bunch of pickleball courts, and they just started building more. They're under construction to have like a separate like private pickleball court area, and then like a tap room pickleball court. It's kind of neat.
I have two things to say to that, and I feel like I'm monopolizing this, and Mike hasn't jumped in here in a while, and he probably has a topic he wants to talk about. But I do appreciate what you said about the difference between those two models and the fact that a lot of craft breweries, had some care for their. What I think it's important to look at, I know we're not talking about like selling out. This is not our selling out episode, but I think it's all on a spectrum, right? I think there are degrees of this. And I think you have the pure, like you said, serial entrepreneurs that are like a 1 or a 2 on the passion for their product, and they're just looking at it as a investment. And then you have like the far end are like, oh, we're completely independent. If anything, we want to like give our employees shares of the company and let them grow with us. And I just think that everyone's on that spectrum, and I don't think that everyone realizes how much that exists in the back of everybody's mind.
Oh yeah, I mean, you look at Breckenridge. They used to make fun of the big guys. Their entire ad campaign was making fun of the big guys.
Yeah,
and they talked about they would never sell out. Who owns Breckenridge now?
Tilray. I
the
think.
The second thing I wanted to say is that the pickleball thing, I feel like 10 or 15 years from now, this decade will be the pickleball decade. Like when they go and make like retro movies, it's like, how do we know we were in like the 2020s? Everyone will just be playing pickleball. They'd be like skiing in the 80s. I don't know why that was like such a big deal. Like everything was about, or skateboarding in the 80s.
I like the idea of there being like
a was Fast and the Furious cars. That was the early 2000s.
Pickleball School 2, Pickleball Patrol. I actually grew up. It's so funny that it's exploded.
Bo Bridges is dead, right? He can't do any of those movies.
Yeah, that's true. But so like I thought it was weird when pickleball started exploding. I actually grew up playing pickleball in gym class. We played. I literally. I didn't do it for maybe the whole week, but I did it for like 2 or 3 days. I skipped 2 classes so I could take 3 consecutive periods of PE during pickleball week. And my PE teacher, I don't think caught on right away. Like, eventually he's like, Johnson, what are you still doing in here? I didn't realize. And I was like, just playing pickleball. But yeah, I during pickleball week in high school gym class, I would skip other classes to go play pickleball. So to me, it was like, that people hadn't heard of it until 10 years ago was kind of weird. But then it's also, for me, the way it's exploded is kind of weird to think about this kind of what to me was more of a niche gym class activity. Because we also played a game called Hoover Ball, invented by our greatest president, Herbert Hoover. When I say greatest president, I'm sure you're all aware of this little thing called the Great Depression. But he's the greatest president born in West Branch, Iowa. And so I had to play Hoover Ball, which I think I've talked about on here, haven't I?
Sounds familiar.
Okay. That involves a volleyball
We'll
net
go with yes.
a medicine ball being chucked over a volleyball net. So
And you keep on going
Sounds
until
safe.
someone's legs break.
well, I was gonna say, so when you're like a 90-pound freshman like me, and Jason Hartley, who like a year later was like the Mr. Universe of Iowa, is chucking a medicine ball at you, you quickly grow to hate. Well, also because we had to go to Herbert Hoover's birthplace 7 field trips a year, but you quickly grow to hate that guy even before you learn that he caused the Great Depression. So
If there's been one
I'm being
thing,
caused a Great Depression right now.
if there's one thing this podcast has been consistent on in all the years, it's fuck Herbert Hoover. It's the one thing we all agree on. If you've really been listening, fans of United We Drink, there's been a thread running through this entire show, and it's all anti-Hoover. So I'm glad it's finally being exposed and talked about openly, because now it can be out there.
So new listeners, please go back and listen to each one of our old episodes to find the Herbert Hoover hate Easter eggs in each episode. Listen 2 or 3 times if you have to search those Easter eggs.
I am a proud card-carrying member of Anti-Hoove.
I won't allow a Hoover vacuum in my house. I won't do it. I don't care.
Dyson or die.
Dyson or die, bro.
All right. So no good way to segue this.
That was the only way to segue this. So I disagree.
So we wanted to talk about brewpubs today. Those places from the 90s and the early 2000s that served food and had like the same 12 beers on tap all the time, like red ale, Hefeweizen, pale ale, triple, double, blah 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 blah. All of those places. Because it seems like there was a number of brewpub chains for a long period of time who were popping up all over the country, and then that kind of went away with tap rooms. Okay, breweries are opening up production spaces with tap rooms. We don't have food. We got food trucks, or you bring in your own food. But recently, it seems like a lot of production places want to put in kitchens and become kind of like brew pubs, or are opening up brew pubs as like secondary means of income for their spots. So we wanted to talk about brew pubs. What were our views on them back in the days, and where do we see them as going right now? It's a little timely because today, when we're recording this, Iron Hill, who was a pretty big brew pub chain, they had 19 locations across 5 states, I think it is, announced that they were closing all their locations effective immediately. They're big in the Philadelphia area. They're from originally from Delaware. I was a big fan of them. I went to a number of their locations. But there were places like this all over. I'm sure many of you know of Rock Bottom, have maybe been to a Rock Bottom, BJ's Brew House, Gordon Biersch, McMenamin's, Ram. These are all brewpub chains. What was that?
I said, now you're just making shit up.
One of those in there was fake. That is true. I want someone to figure it out.
Call them.
So, like, Tim, what were your experiences with like brewpub chains from your early days in beer?
Well, my first experiences with craft
or just
beer,
brewpubs doesn't necessarily mean chain,
weren't necessarily chained, right? So my first experiences in craft beer, Court Avenue Brewing Company in Des Moines. I remember going there as a 19-year-old who looked 16 and not getting carded, even though like the 24-year-olds that I was with were getting carded, and I was very confused. And I think it was just because I didn't ask questions about the menu. I knew what I wanted. I would order the pointed brown. I think they just thought, okay, that's a guy that understands what's going on. I was just faking it. I had no fucking clue. But Court Avenue Brewing Company was kind of like the staple. 'Cause there was also Raccoon River Brewing in Des Moines, just kind of down the road from Court Avenue. That was not nearly as good. But to this day, I still think a lot of people would in Iowa would say they got their entry into craft beer came from Cabco. And so that was kind of my first experience. There was a Rock Bottom in probably West Des Moines, I want to say, and I only went maybe once or twice. I wasn't super kind of familiar with that. I really started going to Rock Bottom when I moved up to Minneapolis, though. Even after the craft beer explosion happened and taprooms were opening up, I still was regularly going to Rock Bottom, and a lot of great brewers from some of those cut their teeth at Rock Bottom here in Minneapolis. Todd Haug, the original Surly brewer, was a Rock Bottom brewer. Pio at Delta Brew Labs in Madison was that as well. And the other one that was big here in town, that is still very much big in town, and is still probably maybe one of the most respected breweries in the state, is Town Hall Brewery. That actually has several other locations that aren't brew pubs, but they still distribute their brew pub beer because they're within the same restaurant group. They've got Town Hall Lanes, Town Hall Tap, Town Hall Station. They can still distribute within that restaurant group. So my local watering hole is technically part of a brew pub chain of Town Hall Lanes, the place where they know my name when I walk in. My Cheers is Town Hall Lanes, and that's part of a brew pub. So brew pubs have been part of my experience through my entire drinking journey.
You know, real quick before Kevin jumps in, I just want to say about Town Hall. Kevin, I've brought this up to Kevin before and he doesn't remember it, but we used to have a person in our beer share group who would bring growlers from Town Hall and for bottle shares all the time. And they were always excellent. Like it was really top-notch stuff. Their name has always stuck with me as like a brewery of quality.
And it still is. And what's amazing is their flagship IPA, Masala Mama, is still Masala Mama. That's still their flagship. It always will be. Like all of these other brands, like Summit has Saga now, and that's had some staying power for the last, 6-7 years, but that's not a legacy brand for them. A lot of these other brands that have been around, you barely even see Surly Furious a ton anymore, but Masala Mama is still consistent. It's still one of the best IPAs ever. Not just in the state, but anywhere. And it's still going to be that first one on the list. I don't get it nearly as much because I like to get its little brother, West Bank, that has lower ABV, so I'm not on my ass after 2 beers. But yeah, they still carry that reputation, and it makes it a little bit more distinct than kind of some of the other fly-by-night stuff.
So I have a question, and this question is not a question that any of our listeners are going to ask, because all of our listeners are industry professionals for the most part. We don't have any novices listening. We figured this out because we've pretty much had all of our listeners on as guests at some point. We've done the math, and it's actually happened. But what is a brew pub? Like, what is the actual definition? And I'll follow this up by saying this. There are areas in the country where you have to make food if you want to serve beer on site. And I know that there are brew pubs, or at least I think they're considered brew pubs, that do distribution. So they're not doing everything in-house. I always looked at a brew pub in the back of my mind as this is a site that produces beer for only on-site consumption, and they make food. That was kind of like my definition of a brew pub. But I don't think that's necessarily true. I feel like Mike is going to school me on the intricacies of this.
I would say you're pretty damn like I would say the most generalized definition of it is about that. Now,
Okay.
it, I think, changes based off of state laws.
Yeah, I think Minnesota has a definition for brewpub versus brewery.
We do too in Florida. But what's funny, so we have a brewpub license, and it is a cheaper version of a brewing license, but you are limited in how much you can make per year. You cannot distribute at all, and you can also not sell anything to go. So you can't do growlers, crowlers, cans, anything like that under that license. It's very prohibitive. But there is nothing that prevents a person from holding a production brewing license and opening a restaurant on their location. So essentially being a brew pub, but you're at a production brewery and you distribute. Yeah, I know a lot of states have like a brew pub license.
Yeah,
It's usually a small, like it has a small cap on it, and maybe has something that says you can do this, you can't do that.
well, so in Minnesota, they're non-production breweries, so they're not distributing. Although there are ways around that by having third parties create your beer. So you can now, within the last year or two, get Masala Mama in cans produced. Fulton or Surly, I think, is doing it. I can't remember who. But I think that's almost treated like a separate entity. But for Minnesota, what it is you're not a production brewery. You're brewing for your locations only. So you're not even distributing kegs anywhere else. Except for if you're within the same restaurant groups, like Blue Plate Restaurant Group.
And you don't have to go through a distributor. You can just transfer it to your location.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But the other thing is now what you can do on a brew pub is that you can have beer and wine and guest taps and all of those things. And so if you have a brewery license, you can only have your beer. You can't have wine. You can't have spirits. Whereas brew pubs tend to have a full bar. They're more of a bar restaurant concept that happens to produce its own beer rather than a brewery that happens to have its own restaurant. I think maybe it's a distinction without a difference, but that's the way I look at it. Is this is a restaurant that produces its own beer versus a brewery that maybe has its own restaurant.
To me, Tim, you hit that. In my perception, that's exactly what it is. We are talking about a concept place that is a restaurant first that has a brewing gimmick. In some ways, is what I view as the brew pub model. And I also want to mention, like, because every state is different, right? So, like in Michigan, I believe, and I could be wrong, because I never worked in breweries in Michigan. I'm originally from there, but every brewery in Michigan makes like everything. They make their own booze. They do alcohol. I think that with their license, they can do a lot more than what I can do with my license in Florida. So once again, from state to state, it's a little bit different of whether you could sell wine or you can sell, guest drafts or what have you. I think that's from state to state. It varies. But in my mind, that is exactly it. Is that when I looked at the brew pub that I was familiar with down here in Florida, and the first one was Hops, which was, a restaurant with a brewing gimmick, and Brewsies, which had 2 locations down here, that was a restaurant with a brewing gimmick.
What an awful freaking name.
Bruzy.
Oh God.
Yeah.
The funny thing was, for a long time, especially when Matt Manthe was brewing there, some of the best beer in the entire state of Florida was coming out of this place. It was amazing. Because he was so good at what he did. But they were restaurants first. People were there for the food, the brewing. It was almost like a rainforest cafe for people that were serious about beer. You know what I mean? Like look at that wall, it's glass, and there's a person behind there, and they're doing stuff. It was almost like dinner and a show. It starts
raining from a barrel every hour on the hour.
That's how I viewed it.
Did they have a Build-A-Beer workshop in there?
But I'm writing all this stuff down because I'm thinking this is coming back, and I'm considering just closing Barrel of Unks and opening up a chain of Build a beer workshops.
So in Florida, the brewpub license is interesting in the fact that it's not a manufacturing license like the brewery license is, or even like a distillery or a winery would have. It's actually an add-on to a liquor license. So
Mhm.
you have to hold some either a 2 COP, which is beer and wine, or a 4 COP, which is a full bar license. And then you say to the state, hey, I want to get a brew pub license to add on to this. And they're like, okay, that'll be $500. Here you go. And then you get your license for that. I think they still do your inspections and all of that stuff. You still have to have like federal approval and all of that too. But it is not like a license. Like we have to get our our license for the production brewery, and then we have to get a 2 COP to serve beer on our premise as well. So it's like two very different licenses. It's one in hospitality and service,
Yeah.
and one in manufacturing, where the brew pub is all under like the hospitality arm of things.
So I wanted to mention this is that, the first time I saw the brew pub concept, as I'm talking about it, as I think we're all kind of discussing it, I loved it because it was like eye opening. Like you go to a place and it has there were no breweries down here, by the way, in Florida when I was getting into beer. So it was a place you can go to have an IPA, a pale ale, a stout, a brown ale, an amber ale, and a Hefeweizen. And it was like, wow, I can try all these beers at one time and they'll give me a
Mhm.
flight. No one else did that.
Yeah.
It was it was really training wheels for the craft beer industry. And it almost seems to me, and this is someone who lives this industry, right? So I'm so deep into it. This is almost like, of course, it seems this way to me, but maybe it seems this way to people outside the industry too. Is that once we had real breweries, those places kind of served their purpose and they didn't seem as interesting anymore. When you can go, when you're in the middle of a map and you open up your iPhone and you go, take me to breweries around me, and there's 75. Suddenly go into a place that makes the same brown ale for the last 15 years and make a decent Reuben sandwich doesn't really appeal to you as much because you've got all these extra options. So I almost feel like in some way, like a mature market grows out of that unless they're very special. Like they do something really, really well. They win a lot of medals. They're staying up on new beer trends. Their food is really, really good, like exceptional. There's a lot of those places, but unless that's the case. Um, but I also wonder if there'll be some kind of rubber band effect where we'll go back to that when all the breweries close down and there's no more places to go get local beer, and then it'll be like, oh, look at the brew pub concept just taken off again.
Well, I mean, we're already starting to see uh breweries here in Minnesota start to convert to a brew pub license, and they're maybe not fully embracing the hey, we're a restaurant, but they're pulling. We're already seeing a lot of people contract out of distribution because margins are shit, placements are shit. It becomes hard. Distribution is a tough game right now. So if I can make all my money in my tap room, but also because even the tap rooms are struggling, is hey, now I can go ahead and offer cocktails. I can go ahead and offer wine. I can go ahead and offer these other things. That we were getting so many guests coming in and asking, hey, can I have some wine? Well, no, we're a brewery, right? Or hey, can I get a Bud Light? Well, no, we make our own. Type of thing. Like people still didn't understand what a tap room was for the longest time, especially because you had so many of these other just restaurants call themselves a tap room, and it muddied the water even more. Um, uh, but I think we are starting to already see as distribution is a big pain point for a lot of people. People are starting to kind of go back to that, and food is mattering a whole lot more, and trying to get people to go out because people just aren't going out the same way they did pre-COVID. And I think getting people to go out has to become a lot more of an occasion. And yeah, the oversaturation of breweries is there's nothing really unique. You know, every tap room with their subway tile and their same uncomfortable stools and their Edison lights and all of the sameness. You know, it's like we're unique, just like everyone else. Um, like I do think you're already starting to see a little bit of that. Now, is it getting fully back to a rock bottom model, or are there going to be so many locations? I know Omni pulled out pulled out of distribution and is now operating multiple locations because you can't in Minnesota you can't have multiple tap rooms. And so I think we're starting to see some of that. There was side note, there was there technically still is this brew pub concept based out of St. Cloud called Granite City. They're all over the Midwest. Founded in St. Cloud, but when I worked at Buffalo Wild Wings in Golden Valley, their headquarters was across the street from us. They don't even brew on site, but they ferment on site. So last I knew, they might not be brewing in Iowa anymore. They were brewing in some weird, like some small, like Jewel or something like that, some small town, and doing what they called their fermentus interruptus. I don't know. It's dumb. They would just ship wort to all their facilities, and then their on-site brewer did all the fermentation. That concept I don't think is going to come back in any way, shape, or form. But I think, and so is there going to be a return to a rock bottom style? I don't know. But more of your local, maybe one off or two off brew pub thing. I think I'm already starting to see it. I think that rubber band is snapping back, to use your analogy.
So I looked up. I'd never heard of Granite City. 15 locations.
Wow.
And they
That's a
used
lot.
to have they used to have a lot more. They actually had to close a bunch down. Yeah.
So go ahead, Mike.
So like I want to pull up something that I found here that is from 2012. And this was the 5 largest brew pub chains by barrelage from All About Beer magazine from back then. And this was BJ's was the number 1 brew pub chain. Did 53,000 barrels. Doesn't have how many locations, but Rock Bottom, 42,000. Gordon Biersch, 32,000, McMenamins, 23,000, and Ram Bighorn, 20,000. Like those are big numbers for multiple locations of breweries. Now I've looked up a lot of these now, and many of them still exist, but in much smaller numbers. The Gordon Biersch is actually huge now, but that is not what they used to be. They are now a production brewery who makes some beer of their own, but they predominantly make Trader Joe's beers. And they're in the top 20 production breweries in the country for craft breweries in the country.
That's interesting.
They sold off all of their brew pubs to Rock Bottom, who was then bought out by a hospitality group called SPB Hospitality. It's Old Chicago Pizza, J. Alexander's, a big restaurant group. And there is one Gordon Biersch location. There's what's this, like Rock Bottom 10 locations for them anymore.
Wow.
Yeah, but BJ still has like a lot. BJ's is in the top 50 of craft brewers in the country as of 2024. Like there's still some of this weird. There's some of hanger-ons to this still.
Well, there's some Frankenstein. There's some Frankenstein stuff going on, right?
Yeah.
Like we have like little parts of things being combined to make other things. One of the things I wanted to get both of your opinions on is and I don't know what chain it was, but there was a place that I went to. What that was which one of the ones you mentioned, the Gordon Beers, the BJ's. I can't remember what it was, but I remember going to a location and seeing two fermenters on display behind glass, uh, like prominently displayed, like in the dining room, essentially. I'm a brewer, and I look around and go, they're not using these for anything. These things are pristine. I don't even think they're plumbed in with glycol. Like they're just there as like set pieces, right? We're talking the Rainforest Cafe model again. Like it's just window dressing. And I was like, well, they're not making any beer here, right? They're just getting kegs from other places. There's a massive factory somewhere. They're contracting with somebody, and they're not making any beer in sight. Or maybe they have to claim that they produce X amount. I remember hearing that at some point, that you have to produce X amount of your beer on site to continue with this licensing. And I just wondered if they were just using these tanks as some kind of like, oh, we do a wild ale in here, like open fermentation at room temperature in the middle of a dining room once a year, so we can continue this going on. I mean, have you guys experienced any of that, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, one, just to get around laws of, like I've literally seen them have, they've got a brewery, but it's like an SS Brewtech cart system. And so maybe they're home brewing a batch on there once, and that's their brewery, but all the other stuff is being produced elsewhere, right? So the law says you have to be an operational brewery, not necessarily that all of it has to be brewed at that site, type of thing. So I've seen that, and then the other side is, and Mike knows my disdain for this, but Smart Brew, which is endorsed by John Taffer, and
I was going to say, this is the thing that he did on an episode of Bar Rescue.
Yeah,
right?
that he did
for LA Brewing Company.
Yeah, LA Brewing Company. Yeah.
Yeah.
And those guys pitched me pretty hard when I was at Buffalo Wild Wings. They were certain it was going to be the best. That would be a great idea for that. But it's not, because there's a brewery that closed in the last year in South Florida, very close to Joel's house, that was doing Smart Brew and talked about how they had brewers and they're doing all this brewing innovation, but that work wasn't produced by them. It's literally just, you get this thing in and you press a button and you let it go. It's like the Keurig for brewing. And I think there's something just so inauthentic and dishonest about that, that I think people have started to kind of rebel against that. But yeah, it is. Yes, I have experienced that, Kevin. It is out there, I think there have been enough people, especially like you said, I think that part of when you said, "Oh, there's real breweries to go to," it's because there was so much of that fake stuff. Now, Rock Bottom certainly wasn't like that. I could sit and actually watch the brewer actually doing things up there, and I knew the brewers. Like I said, many of them went on to other places, and the Granite City, you can see all the tanks and you can see people pitching, but there is no brew house that's back there, right? That they're interestingly now owned by the group that owns like Famous Dave's and Village Inn, which is the weirdest thing to me.
Breakfast place, Village Inn.
Yeah.
I want to follow this up, and Mike, you should weigh in on this. If you had somebody who was just producing completed beer in kegs, in packet, whatever you're able to do in your state, and producing it in, I don't know, Hoboken, New Jersey, and disseminating it to 40 locations throughout the US, or they're producing wort and they're sending the wort to be fermented at these places. Is there any real difference? Are you more comforted by the wort fermentation happening? Because I don't see it. I mean, it seems like just do it the cheapy way and just make the beer and don't risk contamination.
Yeah, I was gonna say, to me, the big contamination thing, but I think that's where they get to call themselves a brew pub, because they are taking a non-beer product and making a beer product out of it. So
that's exactly. They are legally the brewery. Once it is, like, it doesn't become beer until it comes out of a vessel and goes into like a serving, something that's served from either a keg, a can, bottle. So they are the ones producing it. They're not producing wort, yes, but they are producing beer legally.
But and that's legal, and that's a designation that I appreciate. But Mike, what do you think about that as practice? Do you think that that's
I
does
think
that would
that's
that comfort you
it's a
more?
huge pain in the ass. Like I've never seen that before. Like it's weird. Like to think of someone brewing like 10 barrels of wort and shipping it across state lines to a place and then pumping it into an FV, pitching yeast, and like this just I mean maybe they have the best sanitary practices in the world and we don't fucking know. Uh like it's I know some of these chains don't have a brewery on every, like BJ's doesn't have a brewer house at every location. Like the one over by me has absolutely nothing. Um but like to go back to Iron Hill, saying earlier, every single one of their locations except for one that I know of had breweries in them that functioned. They didn't make every beer that was on tap there. They made all of the specialty stuff. They had a production location that made the core year-round stuff that they shipped the kegs to for all of the locations. But it allowed for the brewers at each location to flex their creative muscle and make like just make seasonals and make rotating stuff all the time. I want to go back to what you said before about the places that like are shown. Like I talked about BJ's real quick. There was a place, I hadn't been to it before, but I had many people that I worked with and I knew went to it because it was in Orlando. There was a restaurant at Universal City Walk that had fermenters in the restaurant, and like people were asking me like, is this place making beer? I was like, I've never heard of there being a brewery there, and they're showing me pictures and I'm like, there's no fittings on it. Like the blow off arm has no tri-clamp valve. The racking arm has no tri-clamp valve on it. Like it's just open. And I'm like, they're just using these as decorations in a restaurant, and they looked like they were like at least 30 to 60 barrels in size. Like not cheap pieces of, I mean, they probably are really fucking cheap Chinese shit, but
Single walled,
like
yeah.
it's still a lot of money for all that stainless and to ship
And
it.
space.
Yeah.
Space. I mean, those are places where you could put tables. I mean, that is one of the things that traditionally has killed the brew pub concept, is that okay, if I took all this footprint that I have for this brewery and I just put more tables here because we're just a restaurant, wouldn't I make more money off that than making this beer and just buy other people's beer? That's one of the things that we saw in why Brewsies went under, and I don't know anything about hops, but I believe that was one of the issues.
Also, because it was called Brewsies. That's just
Tim
terrible
is very
marketing.
hung up on that. So it's interesting because the brewpub concept that we're talking about, especially we are in the larger picture talking about a lot of chains, right? Mike, you read off that list of chains, and it was kicked off by a chain, right? 19 locations. Tim then kind of walks us down this road that, there's a lot of breweries kind of going back to this model, abandoning distribution, more favorable licensing and things of that nature, putting in kitchens. I see a lot of that. But is there a future for the chain brew pub? Is there a future for that kind of like pod you can drop all over the country where you can serve the same brown ale or pale ale or fruited wheat beer? I'm going to ask you that, but I'm also going to mention this because I think it's an important thing. And I also think it's kind of the evolution of the concept. Lazy Dog. Lazy Dog has got to be 20, 30 locations throughout the country. There's one in right down the corner from me in Boca Raton. I believe either they've been building or it has been built, one in Orlando. They're mostly out west. Both my brewery and Mike's brewery has done a beer with them for their beer club. They have all their beer produced by one brewery. They're house beers, they're brewpub beers. But they don't claim to brew anything on site, but they claim to be a brewery in some way, in some marketing stuff. They also carry guest drafts and they do full liquor and this, that, and the other. They're food first, but they're using that, like I said, the Rainforest Cafe. They're still kind of a brewery. Is that the new model that is so much smarter? Because you don't have to fake it and put tanks up there. You can just say, this is the Lazy Dog, whatever Mexican lager. And it's made by a brewery that's competent, makes pretty good beer. And it distributes to my 32 locations. And I don't have to pretend that I make it myself.
I mean, it's contract brewing with a restaurant concept attached to it. And I think that is a better thing than contract brewing alone. Like, contract brewing has like almost no upside to it unless you are the biggest fucking name in brewing. And even then, that's hard. Like, all you're doing is selling beer to be at places, and you don't have a physical location to call your own. I guess McKellar did okay with it for a little while, but they have fucking physical locations. Evil Twin has physical locations now, but I think there's something to it with being a restaurant group that you have a contract brand attached to.
I think contract brands. I think for one, we remember in the early 2000s when there's just a lot of white label stuff too, right? Where this is the West Palm American Ale, and it's just Budweiser's like Budweiser American Ale. They didn't stop making it; they just turned it 100% white label. Right? It did not sell as Budweiser American Ale, but they kept on producing it and they just white labeled it for a bunch of bars and restaurants, right? So, but I think that definitely went to the side. But yeah, I think what you're saying is it's not even, to me. It's kind of it doesn't even feel like contract brewing. It feels like collaboration, really, right? We're a restaurant chain that collaborates with brewing brands.
But all the beers are being contract brewed by one place. Melvin makes every beer that has Lazy Dog's name on it.
Yeah, no, I get that. I guess to me, from a branding standpoint, it becomes different than what I think of when I think about contract, right? Because some brands, 21st Amendment, contracted multiple places all over the country.
Right? That's a slightly different kind of model, but looking at it from the brew pub or once again, to revisit the thing I said earlier, the beer gimmick. We're the gimmick restaurant that has our own beers. We saw this with Red Hook. Every single restaurant that had their own IPA, Dave's famous IPA was just Longhammer IPA.
Yeah.
We're gonna big name, little name. You talked about, you call it white label. We're just gonna do that. And we were approached. Early days of Barrel of Monks, I probably had 6 or 7 locations that I had a beer that I normally produce that was just called something different at their place, and it was their house beer. That was a big deal for a while. People still ask for it. It's not as often as I think it was 5-10 years ago. It some of the coolness factor of that has kind of calmed down. But if you look at it in the bigger picture as the gimmick of the restaurant, I think that might be the end game of that concept, is that I don't have to have tanks on site. I don't have to pretend I'm making this. I got 6 brands and they're all made by somebody else. And hey, by the way, I've got a rotating draft list. So if you get tired of my amber ale, you've got the 6 other beers that I have. That might be the thing.
But also, you're borrowing the brand equity of those other brewing brands. Whereas when you're doing that white label, you're not getting that brand equity, right? there's value in saying this beer was designed by New Belgium, right? You know what I mean? Versus saying, "Oh, this is our house beer." Well, who makes it? Well, like that's kind of different. That's what I was proud of with Game Changer at Buffalo Wild Wings is a it was not Longhammer. It was a CBA brewed beer that did say Red Hook Game Changer on there, but it looked very much like Buffalo Wild Wings. It was very much kind of very similar model, right? Now, legally not brewed exclusive for. Like they were smart. They put uh uh Red Hook Game Changer. They found certain placements around the country, so it was not exclusive to Buffalo Wild Wings. And the language made sure to not say exclusive to Buffalo Wild Wings. But that was so co-branded to the point that everyone would be like, "Why do you have Buffalo Wild Wings beer in your towny bar in the middle of Idaho?" Uh, like that to me was what was kind of unique. Now I think again, some of those laws from a national chain perspective are going to get tough. Um, but yeah, I mean, your original question of is there a future for chain brew pubs? I mean, is there a future for chain any restaurant? Like all chains are really struggle. They're really hurting
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah.
They're
good point.
really, really right. As much as the food service industry has struggled across the board post COVID, the chains are some of the hardest hit because if I'm already rarely going out to eat, I'm gonna make that a lot more special than going to Applebee's or to chill. I mean, Fridays is almost non-existent anymore. Ruby Tuesdays is almost non-existent anymore. Buffalo Wild Wings is hurting. Yeah, having to do something different, like having sure call it contract brew, whatever. But to me, it more feels like partnership and collaboration and sharing each other's brand equity than anything else.
I think that there's a future for stuff like that. I think that there's also a future for like it's not chain brew pub, but I'm seeing it with some breweries now is the multi taproom model is essentially opening up restaurants with their beers in them. Burial in North Carolina, like they have two breweries, their original brewery in South Slope and then their production facility, their Forest Camp, but they also have Charlotte location, they have a Raleigh location that are just restaurants, like they restaurants with their beers and their wines and their seltzers and all of that in there, but completely decked out as Burial. Like Firestone Walker has the Propagator in LA that is a brew pub. That's Sam Tierney brews there and has been brewing there for a long time, making awesome beers there. When I was in California in Sonoma County, in Petaluma, where we were staying for most of the time, there's only one actual brewery in Petaluma, Lagunitas. There were like 3 or 4 other brewery tap rooms that have restaurants. Their main facilities were in another town in Sonoma, and they opened up satellite locations. I see that being probably the bigger thing is production breweries opening up restaurant tap room, I'm using like the quotes here, locations that are going to have food. They're going to have their beer and they're going to be completely branded towards them. And you might as well call them brew pubs, I guess, because it kind of works along with that. But they're not brewing anything in there, I guess, so not really. I see more of that than the brew pub chain coming really back.
See, I don't know. I feel like we've seen actually a contraction of some of those on California. Like there have been ones that were brands that weren't brewed out of San Diego they're closed down their San Diego location. I think Stone closed down a couple. I think I've seen people that did go that model of opening up multiple tap rooms start to kind of pull them back over the last couple of years. Maybe I'm just seeing something different, but to me, that doesn't seem like that's the future.
Now they're grasping at straws. It's
Yeah,
what
yeah,
they can try to do.
I think the ones that are probably trying to do something, but I've seen the opposite of the ones that did start to do the multi-tap room thing are now starting to go. We're starting to lose a little bit of control here. We've got to get rid of some of these distractions.
I mean, I think that kind of circling back to the conversation we had even before we started talking about this topic was the idea of like what people had in their minds when they opened their breweries, right? We're going to open a brewery up and we're going to make it big and we're going to sell to Buttermiller or Constellation or what have you. A lot of people had designed to take over the world. I mean, Cigar City is a good example of this. Cigar City, wildly successful, still making great beer under the Monster beverage brand. But at one point, they had a brewery in the airport in Tampa. They had a brew pub.
Do I think?
Oh, they still have it? Okay. So
I think so, yeah.
I don't know. But they had a brew pub.
Yeah.
And they had and it was actually not that far away from their actual like brewery and tap room. And I remember thinking, this is brilliant. Like everything they're doing here is exactly what I would do if I was in this position. Now, I don't know how successful that brew pub was. I don't think it lasted all that long. But sometimes our eyes are bigger than our stomachs and we go, oh, we can do all these different things. But what we do well really translates best in this medium. And I think that the people that are going to the breweries to really engage in the beer, and that's what we're finding for the most part. My customer is really interested in our beer. They might not be really interested in everything we make. They're not interested in every special release. They come for one beer. We come in, we drink single in Havana, we drink two, we get a burger from Chefery, and that's our thing. And that might last for a year, 2 years before they find some new thing to do. And then hopefully we regenerate. We get another person who does a kind of similar thing. But we don't necessarily have a person that's going to go, hey, I'm going to follow Barrel Amongst to their new business venture that's going to happen 6 towns over. And then we're going to somehow integrate in that community and then make this thing happen. The brewpub concept to me is more that, in the fact that we can just kind of drop these pods into any location and they're going to be unique and they're going to stand on their own and people are going to independently get really excited about them. And just as Tim was talking about earlier, these chains, whether it's Applebee's or, TGI Fridays or Ruby Tuesdays, they're not doing too hot. There's some that are still growing. I mean, we have a chain down here in Tap 42, not a huge chain. It's all Florida based. I think there's 5 or 6 locations, but they seem to be doing really well and they seem to be growing, but they don't have the cachet of a national chain that you can, get their food in Montana, like, the Applebee's does.
Yeah, I mean, I think the struggle with the national brew pub concept has always been national chains are. I know my jalapeno poppers in Sheboygan are the same as my jalapeno poppers in Tampa are the same as my jalapeno poppers in Santa Rosa or whatever, right? And so the brew pub had to try to make the exact same. I know my Rock Bottom IPA is going to be the same in Denver as it's going to be in West Des Moines as it's going to be in Milwaukee. Now, these brewers get to do all these little one-offs that are exclusive only to the Milwaukee location, but they still have these 4 or 5 core beers that are core to the brand because national brands exist by having consistent expectation location to location. Like that's the whole point of that, right? That's the why is McDonald's so popular? Because McDonald's Big Mac tastes the exact same no matter where you go. It's the exact same thing. You also get your economies of scale. You get all those other things that come with that. That's what becomes tricky with a brew pub is you're losing all your economies of scale if you're letting each location do too much of its own thing, right? And so you have to have those cores, and I mean that's what makes it reliable. Why is it? Hey, you know what? I might have a layover in Milwaukee, and the closest thing to me is a Rock Bottom. Well, I know I can trust Rock Bottom. I've been to a billion Rock Bottoms. I know, that type of thing. I think a lot of those places kind of rely on that. Or, oh, hey, family's visiting. We don't know what to expect. Or that's why you see a lot of these places by malls and airports and all those things too.
Fucking exactly. That is exactly what I was going to say, Tim. And the fact is that I don't think that the majority of the people that are going to these places are big craft beer people.
Yeah.
I do not think the majority of. I was at a BJ's in Tampa recently, and listen, I was totally in judgment mode, looking around, looking at the menu, but in my assessment, in what I heard other tables talking about, no one was there because the beer. They were there because it was in the mall, and they really liked the burger. The beer was a secondary thing. It had very
Yeah.
little to do with their experience. They weren't going there for that. And I think that is the key to all of this, is that the second that you franchise, you chain, you do whatever this is, you're now just going to the public, and you're just the gimmick place that people go and go, oh, they brew their own beer. Do you drink that? Oh no, I drink their margaritas. But I seen the beer. I'm sure it's great. I feel like that is more what's going on in these places than people going, hey, I'm going to have some great beer here.
Yeah, and we've talked ad nauseum about how tight the margins are getting on beer with the cost of ingredients going up. Like restaurants are already there's already so many prohibitive expenses to successfully operating a restaurant. Add into that added layer of complexity of now you're having to have you know uh more licenses, more overhead, and smaller margins on supposed to be a core product for you, and it doesn't make a ton of sense.
I mean, franchising in brewing is something that's kind of happening a little bit too. I don't know if either of you are familiar with Voodoo Brewing. They're out of like Pennsylvania. They are franchising out taprooms to independent owners. I I don't know if they ever opened the one in St. Pete that they were supposed to open. There was a whole lot of stuff going on with that, but I know someone who worked for their one in Asheville, and I was like, they talked like, oh yeah, we're Voodoo. I'm like, you're not though. And I'm like, so how do you get the beer? Oh, we got to buy it through a distributor. I'm like, so you have to buy your own beer from a distributor at full price. And he's like, yeah, we have some kegs that are like $300 a 50 liter. Like, I'm like, holy fuck. Like, man, how does that model fucking work? And I don't think that it is.
I was gonna
But
say it doesn't. I think is the
but
answer.
it's one of those things that is just like that sounds like grasping at straws to me. Like, holy fuck, this brewery is trying to move so much product that they have, and they're like, and they probably hired some fucking guy to come in and be like, give us some ideas. And they're like, have you thought about franchising?
Well,
And
see,
they're like,
to me,
yeah,
I don't think it's dumb on the brewery's part. I think it's dumb on the franchisee's part.
which is
But
most franchising.
well, I I'm going to completely disagree with you. Considering that like 9 out of the 10 wealthiest people I know are all franchisees. Um, but uh, I mean, because first of all, most franchisees own multiple locations.
Yes.
You don't own a single location. Now there are pockets where they are. It's few and far between. Usually, you get a market development agreement, where you at very least get first right of refusal to anyone else buying. But usually, it's because you're going to develop multiple. But I think, um, I I, I think the challenge with something like that again is you lose the uniqueness, as Kevin was talking about. So ignoring the problem with having to buy the keg at full price or whatever is you just turn it into uh a same thing as everywhere else type of thing, right? The blessing of a chain is that I know what to expect. The worst part about a chain is that I know what to expect. You know?
So what about this? What about for all intents and purposes, a brewpub chain, but each location is its own unique thing? They create a new branding and new theme for each one, but they're all under the same umbrella. Like it's essentially then a restaurant group running
I mean,
different brew
it's
pubs.
it's what Sam Adams did, right? So they had Concrete City Brewing and like there's one that was in Florida. I don't know if it's still there. They had
Concrete
all of
Beach.
these
It's
Concrete
not
Concrete
anymore.
Beach. So they had like
They
7 or
did
8 of
have
these.
that.
Yeah, they had like 7 or 8 of these things all over the country. Now, if you looked at each one, and they talked about them, you looked at their website. They never mentioned Boston beer. They never said anything. They looked and acted as if they were all these independent breweries, except for holy shit, all of their websites were built on the exact same template. They were literally the exact same, just a different skin. But I mean, to me, I felt like that almost felt a little dishonest, and and we've gone back and forth on the local. Yeah, it was a local brewer and it was local stuff and all of that. But at the end of the day, that was going back to a large corporation.
Tim, we have a local example to show you. I think I mentioned earlier, and I can't remember exactly what it was about. Oh, it was the Cigar City model, and I was like, if I was in charge, I would do exactly that. And one of those businesses doesn't exist anymore, so it shows you what I know about stuff. Nothing. The other thing that I thought was brilliant in South Florida was Tequesta Brewing Company, and they had Twisted Trunk, and they had Steam Horse. They opened 3 different breweries, all with the idea of being like that local community's brewery.
Mhm.
All different names, different
Mhm.
concepts, different
Mhm.
areas. No real connecting threads that I could see. Maybe they were in the background. Only one of those places still exists. I said 10 years ago, whatever it was, I was like, guys, if I had my druthers, I would do this. That didn't work either. Now, it could have just been the people in charge. By the way, we're talking about a sample of one, and it absolutely could be individual mistakes made. But that doesn't guarantee anything either. Like,
Yeah,
some of those locations were really good locations. Some of those places were busy all the time, and they couldn't make that thing work.
yeah. I mean, I think that's one thing where I'm always very cautious, and we see, well, this brewery is doing this, and we're seeing, these places open up more locations. I'm like, yeah, just because they're doing it doesn't mean it's a good decision, right? So
Yeah,
just because a brewery might have like 7 locations and one's in Asheville and one's in this and whatever, we don't know that has any long-term stability or is even the right financial decision today, because a lot of that can be smoke and mirrors for a long time. A lot of that can be hoping for banking on something to pay off that never comes to fruition.
Tim, I was mentioning this so that you can understand how wrong I am always. That was my entire point of that. Like, I have no idea what the fuck I'm talking about because I thought it was brilliant.
I mean, it does sound brilliant. I get the idea, right? Like
they definitely said like sister breweries, and they would carry each other's beers in there from time to time. So
For sure.
it
yes.
wasn't completely hidden. It was
No,
pretty
it
open.
wasn't
But
completely
yeah,
separated.
I
Not at
mean
all.
only one still exists anymore, and it was the original one.
I think one of the challenges is that it's hard to do that authentically, right? Whether for as much as we say your chain drinker doesn't care about the beer, or they're just kind of thinking about this blindly, I think there are enough consumers that can I don't know, that have authenticity sensitivity, right? And I think when you start to
Authenticity, sensitivity. Try to say that like 5 times fast.
but
Try to understand what that means 5 times fast.
what I mean by that is that, you know, the more you become part of a group, right? So if you do promote that we're sister breweries and all of that, the more it starts to become, oh well, then decisions are made up here that it doesn't feel like it's whether or not that's true. The more layers that you add up to anything, that's why like so many of these restaurant groups that own multiple chains, because it's the same thing in the restaurant, right? Darden owns multiple brands. Um, uh, the I forget the group that's IHOP and Applebee's. All of these, you know, these restaurant groups Inspire that it has Arby's and Buffalo Wild Wings and I'm trying to remember what else now. But they all have all of those, and so you already have the complexity of, well, you know, people always thought, oh well, it was corporate that made decision. When honestly, the local restaurants had most of the say over their beer, their tap lists. But it was easy to look at it as a corporate thing. And then when you add in the restaurant group that owns all those things, I think when you do that with a brewery concept, as soon as people start to understand, oh well, this is a collective of breweries, suddenly, right, wrong, or indifferent, it becomes less authentic because it feels less mom and pop at that point. And I mean, it goes back to my whole idea of local is a bullshit term because you don't know who the owner is. A lot of times, there's one that has been, you know, it's the only location and you know, it's been the same whatever, but that owner spends most of his time living in the Hamptons and is never around, like type of thing. Like, I think that's where, you know, you get that. So it's not always true authenticity sensitivity, but it is still sensitivity to perceived authenticity.
Oh, I thought Kevin was going to say something there.
I was going to, and then you started leaning towards the microphone, and I thought you were going to
No,
say something.
I was
and
thinking
always
that I
talk
had
over
to
you,
fill time for you as
Okay.
you thought.
I thought he was
I-
burping.
I will just say this. I think what you said, Tim, is profound in this conversation because we are always talking about where the craft beer consumer is. And I think the person that wants to go to the source of where their beer is made and talk about how that is like the source of the beer is a very small fraction of the people that care about beer. The
Yeah.
vast majority of people who care about beer that want to drink beer, they just want to go to the grocery store and get their Budweiser. They have no interest in going to St. Louis. They don't want to go to a Budweiser factory and see it made. They just want to drink their beer.
Yeah.
We have created a space where we want to talk about how special this is. And what the
You want to see
Brewpub-
how the sausage is made and talk about how the sausage is made.
Yeah, you want to actually engage in this. And I think the people that want that have found breweries, local breweries where a bartender actually knows about it and they're interested in it and they're engaged. And by the way, small amount of people, a fraction of people, right? And we're seeing that more and more. And those other places, and just this is completely personal experience, but also it seems like experiences that you guys have or opinion you guys share is that these places that are succeeding in spite of that when they're national chains are just in malls and in tourist destinations where people are like, well, where are we going to go? Well, let's go to this BJ's Brewpub over here. Hey, they make their own beer and we'll get a burger and little Johnny can run around the table. I mean, it's not about the beer. It's not about really engaging with it. It's about that, you know, microcosm experience of this, very similar to going to a chain restaurant and the beer just happens to be secondary. And I think we've seen this manifest in the market in real time. We've seen it erode.
I'm pointing to my Crispin can because this goes right back to my conversation earlier about the founders of Crispin.
Yeah.
It wasn't about the product. It was about the brand.
Exactly.
Yeah.
My local BJ's is at an outlet mall. So yeah. All right. Anyone want to add anything else to this, or should we head into last calls?
I'm good.
Yeah,
All right.
no, this was good discussion. We do our best on the fly, gentlemen.
Oh no, I do want to add.
This was
one
planned
more.
for weeks. What are you talking about?
I do want to add one thing. We're talking about brew pubs. I would be remiss if I did not mention Marin Brewing Company, which was one of my favorite brew pubs I ever went to in my life. The beer was fantastic. The food was good. I love the area. So I'm just going to say that. That's not my last call. I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that because we're talking about brew pubs.
R.I.P.
No longer there.
Yeah. All right, let's head into last calls. The point in the show where we give each other an unspecific amount of time to talk about whatever it is that we want, whether it be beverage related or not. The only rules is that it is uninterrupted, unopposed, and unobjected. We'll start with Tim today.
I had a really good last call idea last night, and I completely have forgotten what it was.
That menu was really good. So.
Yeah, no. I remember going, ooh, I'm gonna make that my last call tomorrow. And now that we've gotten this far, I have completely spaced whatever it was. I'm sure it had something with either free speech or the erosion of our democracy as we know it. I'm sure it was something I got fired up about. But instead, I think for my last call, I'm going to instead rant about travel sports. I really thought I was going to avoid travel sports, and my daughter is now doing travel basketball. And I'm not really looking forward to having to drive all over God's green earth. She's 10. Why are we driving to a tournament in Rochester? I'm 5'6". My daughter is the child of a 5'6". She is not going to make the WNBA. She's not going to get recruited to a major college. So why am I going to be traveling? And why is her mom, her mom and I, paying these fees? And then there's going to be, Rochester is going to be a hotel, and I love my daughter. I'll do anything for her. I'm glad that she's doing a team sport. She's done a lot of things individually. She does horseback riding. She does skiing. She plays drums. I think team sports are good to some extent for, I always hated how much corporations, hire former athletes. Like, that's a big deal. When I was, again, at B-Dubs, one of the main financial guys was a former college hockey player. One of the vice president of operations, whatever, used to be an assistant coach at Michigan for basketball. Like, and then there's sports analogy after sports analogy after sports analogy that I always feel like leaves out all the people, the non-sports people. But the reason why they're there is because that is most people's exposure to teammates and working as a team and having collective goals. You don't see that a whole lot in a lot of other things. So I am okay with my daughter doing a team sport. But again, she's 10. What are we doing? 10. I was playing in the same gymnasium every other against 4 other teams. Like why do we have to, I know, like, thank God it's basketball, because that's cheap. Like, so many of my friends have kids that do travel hockey. Hockey equipment is expensive as fuck, and then they grow out of it every year. So they're literally shelling out thousands and thousands of dollars for their kids to go travel around. And you know what? Probably a lot of these kids, I mean, with the state of hockey, probably are gonna go play at Mankato or St. Cloud or somewhere else type of thing, but they're not going pro. Um, let's let's quit hyper-focusing kids on one sports. That's where they're getting all these repetitive motion injuries. Just bring back the small local teams, please. That's all I'm really looking for. That's so not the plea I was going to make, but the plea that I'm still very much feeling right now is kids got to be kids. And rant.
All right, so I wanted to take some time to talk about a new podcast that I'm doing. It's not one that you can listen to though. It's not on Apple Podcasts. It's not on Spotify. It's not anywhere except for on an email that I send to family members because it's a podcast that I do with my kids. My kids have gotten to know that I do a podcast. They call it Daddy gets on a call with his friends. And I've started to tell them that we record a thing called a podcast. And a few weeks ago, I was listening to a podcast that I have listened to for a very long time called 99% Invisible, 99PI for fans. They were celebrating their 15th anniversary of their show. And at one point, the host of the show, Roman Mars, he is also the father of twin boys. And he talked about how in the very early days of the show, he had his kids do parts of an ad read for one of their sponsors. It was a service that was a voice message sending system that was kind of like voice emails you could send to people, and it was done by Intuit, who the tax company, MailChimp, like it doesn't exist anymore. But they played some of these old ad reads, which basically was just him asking his kids what they were into at the moment. And they'd say stuff like monster trucks, dinosaurs. And his kids were like 3, 4 at that time. And now they're heading off to college. And he's like getting all choked up listening to those little voices, as he said again. He's like, I missed hearing those little voices. And it got me thinking, I don't want to ever miss hearing the little voices that I have in my house right now. Because there will be a point in time where those voices change and I will forget what they sounded like. Sure, we have videos and stuff of them because of phones and stuff now, but I want to have audio recordings of these voices. So I have started recording a podcast with my boys, and I just ask them simple questions. I ask them 2 questions each episode and get their answers on them. And then I send it out to our immediate family, just to my wife, to my parents, to her mom, to her brother. That's it. I just send an email. And it has been fun. It's been frustrating. All the things of making a podcast. They like to grab at the mic. They interrupt each other. So it's been one of the funnest things. And I don't know how long it'll go for, as long as they're interested in doing it. But they are interested in doing it right now. And I think that that's fun as hell, that I can show them something cool to do, all while creating this catalog of their voices that I get to archive and just go back and listen to 10, 15 years from now, when I miss hearing those voices instead of fine, blah, 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 stuff like that. So, yeah, I just wanted to share my new podcast with you all that you'll never hear. But, Kevin?
Okay, that's not fair. It's not fair to have to follow that. That's amazing. That's my favorite thing I've ever heard. And also, I don't give a shit about the rules.
Quick editor note. Kevin's microphone was messing up during his last call, so it is not going to be in this episode. Sorry. All right. Kevin, do you want to plug anything?
No.
Tim?
Busy collabed with Summit Brewing on a cold brew amber ale. If you are a listener that is in Summit's distribution footprint, look for that can in their favorites mix pack. Obviously, our Florida listeners aren't going to get that, but some other people might be in that footprint. So please go ahead and take a look for that. Had it at the tap room last Friday. It was quite delightful. So yeah, that's what I'm going to plug.
Tim's cold brew makes for a good espresso martini as well, in case you are ever looking. I'd never made one before. My mother-in-law wanted one for her birthday, so we were gonna like, okay, we'll make them. I just thought I was gonna make like batch shots of espresso, and then I'm reading like, oh no, most places that know what the fuck they're doing with cocktails use cold brew for it. So I went to my local Publix and grabbed some Busy and made some really tasty espresso martinis with it. So
Yeah, if you guys
big
do
shout out to
anything,
Busy.
any listeners that are doing that, send us your recipes. Send me your pictures. I wanna see and hear about those experiences with busy stuff. If I'm going to walk the company line here for a bit, but I'm really proud of how versatile it is. That's the only reason I have our decaf at home. I don't drink cold brew to not have caffeine in it, but it does make for this cocktail mixer as well. So.
Other than that, go check out our website, unitedwedrink.com, and you can check out the Brands We Love page. You can buy stuff on there, and we get a little kickback for any time you do that. I just want to state, you've heard me do the ad read for Made In for years now, and I've said how I'm not just a representative, I'm a customer, like that men's hair care thing. I just bought another thing from Made In. I got their carbon steel griddle and just seasoned it again. It comes pre-seasoned, but they recommend doing another seasoning. So I'm like, okay, I like seasoning stuff. So I've continued to add to my repertoire of Made In Cookware inside of my house. It's fucking incredible stuff. If you are into cooking and using high quality equipment in your house, you should be buying Made In stuff. So go to our website, click on the Made In link, buy stuff. It helps our show. Other than that, we'll be back in a couple weeks with another new episode. Thank you everyone once again, and cheers.
Cheers.